Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of Dance of Thieves by Mary E Pearson. This book was my Patreon book pick. Every month my Patreon supporters get to vote in a poll to pick one book off of my TBR that I will read and review. In addition to that, I also have a Patreon VIP pick in which one person gets chosen from a raffle of all of my Patreon supporters, and they get to pick any book off my TBR for me to read. There's not even a poll selection, they just get ultimate power. If you are interested in participating in my channel in either of those ways, and a few more, there's other perks there on Patreon. I will link my Patreon on the screen for you to check out. So Dance of Thieves is the first book in a new duology from Mary E Pearson. This follows in the Remnant Chronicles world. So the Remnant Chronicles was the first trilogy, the first book being Kiss of Deception. I have reviews on those books as well. It's one of my favorite YA fantasy trilogies, and this book takes place, I think, 8, maybe 11 years after the events of those books and follows completely new characters. This book is a dual perspective. One of the perspectives is Kazi. She is a renowned thief and is also part of the Queen's Guard. Jace is a leader of a sort of mafia family in another part of the world, and Kazi is sent to the city that he is, sort of like a city-state, that he is sort of ruling over to investigate some sort of war crime things that are going on, and their paths intersect and everything kind of goes from there. So first off, I was really excited for this new series because even though it wasn't following the same characters from the Remnant Chronicles, I loved the Remnant Chronicles so much for the fact that it was a fantasy story, but it was very character focused, and I did enjoy the fantasy elements that we had. There's a lot of political intrigue in that story, and I just really deeply enjoyed the characters and interactions and politics going on in that story. So I was expecting something similar from this duology, which I don't quite feel that I've gotten, so let me get into that. First off, I'm going to talk about the world building. The big disappointment world building wise for this for me was that there really wasn't any new world building. I was really expecting, because we were going to a different area, that we'd get some newness to it, and I didn't really feel like we did. I really liked a lot of the different places that we saw in the Remnant Chronicles, the different cultures and things, and while there was a new sort of city-state that we're seeing, I didn't feel it was that different. Yes, they had this sort of mafia-run culture, but it didn't feel super different from other parts of the world, especially when you had places like Venda, which was introduced in the first book, and how cool and different that culture seemed. So having this sort of seemed like a step back, and again, there wasn't a ton of new world building, there weren't really many new creatures or anything, and there wasn't really many additional fantasy or magical elements here. There's always this underlying thread of magic in this world that isn't quite explained, and it's almost like it's not magic. I was expecting that to be like kind of explored a little more. There's mentions of that with one of these characters, but sort of like the first book, it's just very vaguely glossed over. And at this point, with it being a second series in this world, I was kind of hoping for a bit more with that. You do get some new political players in here, but I didn't feel like those new political players are very strong. So with the political machinations and things being introduced being kind of weak, and the fantasy elements being kind of weak, that was disappointing to me. As far as our characters, I just didn't love them as much as I loved the characters from the Remnant Chronicles. I don't want to keep comparing, but at the same time, it's set in the same world. There's mentions of those old characters, things like that. You don't have to have read the other series necessarily to have read this, but it just kind of makes more sense. Anytime someone asks me, like, do I have to read, you know, the Grisha trilogy before reading Six of Crows, or this before Remnant Chronicles, whatever, I'm like, technically, no, but you're gonna not get the full experience if you don't. Just to put that out there. I did prefer Kazi to Jace. Kazi's a thief. I love thieves, and I did believe that she was a good thief. Sometimes you will have characters that are good assassins or good thieves especially, and it's just kind of, they're a good thief, and you don't get to see how they're a good thief or why they're a good thief, and you really see that with her. So I did enjoy her as a character. With that being said, I don't feel like I believed a lot of the reasons why she was doing the things she was doing, especially as a thief, and as someone who grew up on the streets and things like that, and her level of trust and things. With Jace, also, I expected to like him more. I love mafia-type families. I think that's such an interesting thing that you can play around with politically, especially in like fantasy settings. I didn't enjoy him, and again, I felt like his choices weren't very logical a lot of the time. I also didn't really buy his tough side with the whole mafia family thing. Yes, you have moments where it's like, okay, he's threatening people or he's killed people or whatever, but it still wasn't like, I didn't get that sort of morally grayness that I want with that mafia type family. Overall, it's very much depicted like he's a pretty good person, and I'm like, that wouldn't be true if they were really the mafia type family they're supposed to be portrayed as. Another big thing about this story is that the romance plot is almost the main plot, and then everything else is a subplot. Some people also felt that way with the Remnant Chronicles trilogy. I didn't personally. I felt like the main plot was the main plot, and the romance added to it and was a very, very strong subplot, but wasn't the main plot. With this, I really felt like everything was happening around their romance dynamic, and because of that, it felt like they sort of got together, or all those feelings started developing very, very quickly, and I felt like both characters had reason to be not trusting of each other. There's again reasons, miscommunications, reasons why things happen sort of quickly and then everything else just gets kind of thrown off kilter, but I still didn't find those reasons very believable for the types of characters these two people are supposed to be. There's also again that element of things keeping them apart, which again I didn't quite believe, because you had that initial quick attraction getting together type thing, and so then when you have things upsetting that balance with them, I just didn't find it quite believable, because I'm like, well, you already crossed that hurdle. I don't know why it's a problem now. As far as the mentions of old characters from the other books as well, I didn't actually really like it. The only character that I really liked seeing was Leah, and obviously that's not a spoiler. You know that those characters are going to pop up within this, you know, from the very beginning. So the only one that I liked hearing mentions of was her. I'm not super surprised, because also in the Grisha books, when Alina gets mentioned, I'm always like falling over myself, just so emotional about it. And Leah was my favorite character from the series, but there was other characters mentioned that I really liked while reading the Remnant Chronicles, and I was like, why are you even mentioning them? Also, it becomes very clear that everybody is just together and straight. When you have all these mentions of everybody in this sort of like, the ones that are happy and alive still from the last series are happy and alive together in a straight relationships, just happy and alive, everybody. And there's a pretty big cast of characters, and I'm like, that gets tiresome. That gets tiresome. For the happily ever afters, for the everything kind of looking the same, that becomes very apparent when you're doing these mentions of other characters. So lastly, we'll talk about the plot. Again, like I said, the actual plot is so secondary to the romance plot, which was very disappointing to me, because I felt like the villain in here was so incredibly lackluster and mediocre. The villain honestly feels kind of pointless. Like, I don't even really know why they're supposed to be this big bad. And especially when you have some of the villains and antagonists from the other series, one of them being the Commissar, who is a great villain, and then you have just this pointless villain here that's kind of just feels like he's thrown in to create problems with this love story. I'm like, I don't need this from you at all. Things also did seem to drag a lot, and that was disappointing. It did speed up more towards the end, and that was nice. I felt like I got through the last third of the book way quicker than I did the rest of the book, and the rest of the book wasn't hard to read by any means. I still kept along at a solid clip, but I kind of found like I knew sort of the things that were going to happen. There is a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of this, though, sort of. Very similar to the cliffhangers that happen in the Remnant Chronicles, like that tone of cliffhanger. I do feel like I kind of know what might happen in the second book a bit, and some of the things and themes happening there and tropes, so I'm not sure if I even want to read it, but at the same time the second book is either about to come out or just came out. So I guess I might read it. I don't know. It is just a duology, so I kind of want to finish it up. At the same time, I kind of feel like I know some of the things that are going to happen, especially with the whole love plot being the central plot. So I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. So overall, I gave Dance of Thieves 2.5 to 3 stars. It was just very mediocre for me. I did find that throughout the story, once just like the romance plot that I wasn't really into as the main focus, I did find myself getting a bit annoyed, but I still really like Mary E Pearson's writing and her world building and her characters. I just didn't love them as much as I did in the Remnant Chronicles trilogy. I am going to be doing a spoilery gripe on this book, so if you're interested in that, go ahead and check that out. I'll link it on the screen. So comment down below and let me know what you thought of Dance of Thieves. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.